Hi, and welcome to the midpoint conversation within this Music Ed summer series. This summer series is a continuation of an event that took place in February. That event was focused on how music teachers and music teacher educators are responding to ICE violence and threats of ICE violence within their school community. That event was hosted by the NAFME Social Justice Special Research Interest Group. And the summer series, we get to take a deeper dive into some of those themes that were shared. Now, when ICE violence is present in our communities, it affects our students. And when it affects our students, it affects our schools. When it affects our schools, it affects our classrooms. And as music teachers, it's important for us to be knowledgeable and to understand how to best support our students and to best stand up for the humanity of our communities. And I'd like to share a special thank you for everyone who has made this possible, for all the panelists, all the contributors, and also to Decolonizing the Music Room for this platform. My name is Amy Lewis. I use she, her pronouns. I am a music education professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
I'm Lorelai, she, they pronouns. I teach music education, general music education at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
I'm Lorenzo Sanchez-Gatt, and I teach over at Boston University.
And I'm Adrian Davis, and my pronouns are he, him, and I'm an assistant professor of music ed at the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities.
I would love to jump in with a question that I would really just want to hear everyone's perspective as well. But Amy, particularly yours, since you were able to bring us all in for this conversation. So I think about this adage specifically in grassroots organizing, but I've been attempting to always bring it into my teaching, which is to think globally and act locally. And I'm wondering in what ways you were able to think about that in number one, even curating this and bringing us on, but then also how we all think about that in our teaching, because it can sometimes be daunting.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And sometimes these issues feel so big and so heavy in a way where we feel as though, like, what can we do? What can we do? And for me, what is most grounding is thinking about, well, who am I in community with, right? Where can I create different ripples, right? I'm not like nobody here, like the struggles of thinking about all of the macro issues is that it's so daunting and heavy. And so, like, the connections that we have at the local level, as you said, that is where the impact is made. Our immediate relationships, that's where change and influence is made. And so I just wanted to create a space that reminds music teachers, because, music teachers are incredibly impactful and influential. I want to create a space where we are reminded of the deep connections that we have with one another at the most basic level. And I'm certain other folks have thoughts about this too.
Yeah, one of the things that really just interests me about that statement about thinking globally and acting locally, one of I guess the catches even to that statement is that our local behaviors, our local actions are very important, but many of the things that we do locally are impacted by what is produced or the systems that exist globally. So, like, for example, I'll keep it, I'll sort of simplify it for the music educators out there that are listening, that say you want to, we use the buzzword of like, we have to diversify our repertoire, which, yes, that is very much global thinking. But then if your state standards, or if your state lists per se, um, say otherwise, or if your assessment faculties, or if your assessment systems that are in place are saying otherwise, that you have to quote unquote stick to the script, then how is it even possible to operate in a global sense if I'm bound to these particular systems?
I think for me, the idea of think globally, act locally is always reminding myself that the things I do locally do matter, right? Because sometimes in that way that you feel like everything is so overwhelming, sometimes it's overwhelming and I feel despair. I don't know if that's the right word. And then sometimes it's overwhelming and I feel anger and rage, like hurry up and let's just fix this, right? It's really frustrating. That those little things that I do locally, even though they seem disconnected to those global things, do have some sort of connection. And then as a music teacher, educator, like working with undergrads, modeling the notion of I'm always just making those connections out loud all the time. Do you see how this and this, like I'm always just doing this explicitly, hopefully that like, well, hopefully it model. And sometimes I even say, hey, I'm explicitly saying this connects to this because I want them to understand that. And I think being able to say those things out loud is as much for me, like as just a reminder that, yeah, it is connecting. Right. And then maybe we can, I think sometimes it gets overwhelming thinking about the big picture too, right? Like doing this constant like focus, out focus, out focus. That's exhausting too, right? So maybe the more you do it, the more it's like a muscle. You get better at it. You get some what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not a sports person, so your conditioning, you get bigger muscles. I don't know, something
That muscle memory or
muscle
something.
memory, something
There
like
you
that.
go. Yeah.
I'm talking more about like when you can run for a long time, stamina. Oh my gosh, words, stamina. Yeah.
And there's, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lorenzo.
No, all of you saying that is making me think about something else, a different dynamic that I hadn't considered. When I'm acting locally, let's say, for example, I'm focusing on, I'm thinking about June last month being Pride Month. If I'm doing something that is pride themed in my community, I can't do that in a vacuum where ICE is attacking citizens. I can't do that in a vacuum where there's not all of these different global atrocities, so for lack of a better word, or to use the correct word, occurring, right? So I even think about in our endeavors to act locally, we have to do it in a way that's, you know, ethical, or at least acknowledges that, you know, we're not in a vacuum.
Mhm.
So thank you all for you know, creating this environment. Adrian, I know you were going to say something.
Well, I'm just thinking about how the local levers, or should I say the levers that are controlling local systems, are in many cases being produced outside of the local system. And then I also am wondering about, maybe this is a critical question, maybe it's a petty question. I don't know how it's going to resonate, but if we're talking about the global, or thinking globally, well, what part of the globe are you talking about? Because you have parts of the globe that systemically or historically, it's been okay to think globally. But I'd say if you maybe go a little bit below the equator, um, it hits a little bit different for groups of people.
Yeah.
So are we talking about a specific part of the globe, or what are we talking about when we're thinking globally?
I think that's an important question, and I think it does connect to what Lorenzo was saying with regards to how we don't live in a vacuum, and our actions are not in a vacuum, right? They create these ripple effects, and it's and within not only ripple effects going back and forth, reverberation, whatever. It also makes me think about, Adrian, within your blog, you were talking about, you gave an incredible list at the end of how we can think forward. And within that, you highlighted the idea of self-care within the teaching profession, within music teachers and all of this thing. And the idea of self-care does not exist within a vacuum, right? Because there are structures that are in place that are forcing people to have to deal with self-care, as opposed to creating a structure to where teachers are cared for, period, right? To where the teaching profession, our responsibilities to students, right? Our responsibilities to our communities, right? That, like, the structure of our jobs, and this can go for really any job, right? Within our society, right? The idea of self-care is an issue of the structure of the expectations within our society, jobs, etc.
I also feel like the environment we're in really distorts what self-care can look like.
Mm.
Because when you're in an environment where your work takes every drop it can out of you, self-care looks like, buying things to pamper yourself. When if you're in an environment where your work actually acknowledges you, self-care would look different. It would look like, meal prepping. It would look like furthering one's own interests, like their own musical interests. Maybe I'm going to learn more about tuba and throat singing for this time period, but I don't have that time for that self-care because of the environment. It's a really interesting perspective thing.
Yeah, I think systemically, when teachers are engaged and get hired for work, it is where we are
Also,
all worker bees and unbothered about all of the dangers that come with the position of being a teacher, the physical danger, the psychological danger, the musculoskeletal dangers, all of those things that are engaged, needed to engage in the art of teaching. And so self-care, to a certain extent, teaching, especially in public school, and I'll just use public school as an example, it kind of puts all of us in sort of at least what I'm calling like a reverse airplane mode, or reverse airplane safety mode, where when you take a flight and the flight attendants are there, they're doing all the signs and all of that. And one of the main things that they say is, in case of emergency, put your mask on first before you help anyone else. Well, as a teacher, we're the last people to put our mask on, or we're the last people to protect and take care of ourselves, because we spend a lot of our time taking care of our students, making sure that our lesson plans are the way they need to be, that we're following whatever our administrators and whatever our teams and our curriculum and our school improvement plans. I mean, I've named like 3 or 4 different things, and I haven't even gotten to self-care yet. So uh, it's these, it's this reverse airplane safety mode where we're having to, and we're indoctrinated, even in our institutions, that these bullet points have to get done. If you went through anybody's ed TPA program, you had to do a million things. And I'm sure self-care was not one of them. It's not even on the list. Or if it is, it's like a very, very small bullet point along the way.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, like, it's like the way that our jobs are constructed, it shouldn't have to be a space, right? Like the structure of our society forces us, like Lorelai, like you were saying, like there's this consumeristic like self-care, instead of self-care just being existing, right? We should just be able to exist. Self-care has become commodified, right? As opposed to we should be able to be in community with our people and exist.
This it kind of leads into my next question in a way that's quite natural. So, social justice efforts, which rest can really be conceptualized as a form of resistance, right? Um, you know, there's often accusations that people are so reactive with it. Well, it's because the conditions compel us to be reactive, right? But my question then is, in what ways can we be more proactive with this climate that we're in?
It is essential, I'll say, to make sure that there are proactive space practices within our lives and existence, that helps us to maintain, right, stay afloat. One thing that has been challenging but essential for my own practice is to slow down, because when everything is reactionary, everything feels like it has to be done quick, right? You have to have a statement quick, right? You have to respond, reply, show support quick, and in this very specific way. And sometimes that is absolutely necessary. And so for me, the way that I've attempted to balance this highly reactionary space that we're in is to take pause and breathe, right? Think deeply, reflect, right? And be curious, right? And so within our reactionary state, it's common for folks to create assumptions within quick reactions. And for me, the slowness or the moment of reflection is to sit with my own curiosities, like within that space, within whatever is happening. And so, like, for example, this gathering, this series, like, I wanted to do this spring of 2025, right? And and I was in place, and it felt like it wasn't right. It felt like I needed more time and more space to think deeply about what it means to connect, what it means to respond, still respond, but respond thoughtfully within, like, a state of such uncertainty where people are experiencing so much violence, right? And so much fear. And so that's why, like, I waited until, I was able to have more conversations, plant more seeds. But to your question, Lorenzo, like, I pause, and it's hard, but I pause, reflect, and try to center curiosity.
Just to go off of that too, Amy, the idea of pausing and reflecting, for me, there's always like that point where I also have to recognize. I always like am big about like just recognizing like what I'm doing at the moment, right? So, but also like, so the thing before the pause is to also mark it for me to say, oh, I am feeling this, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling this, right? And then be able to then say, why am I feeling this? What is causing me to feel this way? It's all that kind of slow down method, slow down process that you're talking about. That's kind of like part of my practice as well. But also the notion of being like the reactions I feel too. Like I'm just kind of recently been okay with holding those and saying, hey, I feel this strongly and I feel this deep, and there must be a reason why, and being okay with that, and like saying, I see that, and I want to know why I feel this way and why react so strongly to this, right? Before I do anything again. I think when I was younger, it would just be straight to the reaction and straight to rebuttal, right? So, but somehow not trying to suppress those strong emotions you might feel, to like hold them and say, hey, friend, What are you about? Like, what's going on there? I guess that's the curious part, right? Too.
Honestly, I think the reactive work is a key piece to social justice because it can never eliminate the reactive, because that is part of the reason that we have to have social justice is in reaction to uh, historical injustices. So, but I do think that along the way, I think that along the way that we can be proactive by just asking those critical questions, um, and maybe from the idea of not necessarily like how can I fix this right now, but more so of how have I been complicit um, in continuing to perpetuate systems along the way. So because nothing is going to be a quick fix. Now, I do believe there are some quick fixes on maybe a smaller level, but I think just doing just a critical audit of the systems ahead of time, especially before, like in your classrooms, before students show up, uh, yeah, we need to be doing an audit of the systems that are in place that are creating um, inequality. And this could be down to, from a music standpoint, like what are our auditions looking like? What is our repertoire looking like? What is it not looking like? What does the grading look like? How are we assessing? Because there's nothing neutral about anything that we're doing. So, and I think along the way, as we create maybe multiple,
Mhm.
I think that will help to dismantle maybe some of the inequalities and help us to be more proactive, like you're saying, Lorenzo.
Yeah, that putting it into connection with that notion of thinking globally and acting locally. Some of the things that I try to do, even in my own teaching practice, is number one, try to identify where all of my students are coming from in the world, and then understanding that those contexts that they're in, they got stuff that's going on over there. And if I know what's going on over there, it may help me very much bridge some connections. And I'm not thinking about this so much in a public school context. The example I'm thinking of is I recently was teaching a graduate student that was from Singapore, and there was a lot of statements that were being said about how their society in some ways was beyond these conversations of racism. And then once we were able to have some critical languages or critical conversation about what languages are more prominent and what it means when the leaders in Singapore talk about speaking with proper English. And then my question is, going back to Amy's notion of curiosity, well, what does it mean when it says proper? And having those disparate global ideas going, being able to bring them into that context, it really does help. And there's ways to do that also into like our teaching practices too.
Yeah, I
Yeah, one
think,
of my favorite questions is like, what do you mean? Like, tell me more. Right? Sorry, Amy. Go ahead.
yeah, the tell me more. Yeah, that is key. And also, like, I see, like, being able to teach future teachers, um, I mean, like, it's a privilege. Very grateful, hold a lot of gratitude for this, job and this, to be able to, teach future teachers something that, like, yes, yes, there's a lot of impact within that. And for us to be able to provide space for students to like think about like where they come from, what they're sitting with, what they're wrestling with, right? And then speak it as you talk about, Lorenzo, bring that into the classroom so that us as instructors, we're not making assumptions about our students, but we know our students, and then we are then modeling what that can look like for them when they are in the classroom, right? I think that is something that is essential, and I try to make those explicit ties, right? And so, Lorelai, as you're talking about, like, what do you mean? Tell me more, right? That is incredible modeling for students, these future teachers, whenever they are in their classrooms, right? And they are able to create conversations that are centered around music making, our communities, our society. They can then take those tools and use that for all of these K-12, PK-12, and beyond music making spaces.
I have a question for y'all. So we're talking about these idea thoughts about how to be proactive or how to set up your classroom in certain ways. I think a lot of that just kind of doesn't assume. I'm not saying it assumes in a bad way, but it also assumes that the teacher kind of already knows these things explicitly or has studied them. Like, how do you know you're doing something that maybe is inequitable? Like, you're honestly trying not to be, but you're reproducing systems that you have grown up with, right? And without realizing or knowing that those systems are inequitable, you're just doing them again. Like, how do you break out of that cycle? How do you get better at recognizing those things that you're doing and those ways that are those unseeming ways? Like, I have a seating chart, or I'm assessing. Like, sometimes we don't necessarily put those two together, like the inequities in those. Like, how do we get started for folks who are wanting to get better at this?
One thing that has helped me feel perhaps less guilt and more willingness to just do the thing is this concept of critical race praxis. So a lot of people are familiar with this concept of critical race theory. It is really a way of looking at a situation. That's the easiest way to explain what that looks like. And it's looking at it through the lens of racialized difference and how that racialized difference has systemic and material outcomes that favor people that are in hegemonic groups, predominantly more white groups, versus people that are non-white, right? So critical race praxis is saying we have the theory, and it's three phases. It's the conceptual. It's saying I want to do this better. Then it's the material. It's saying, well, what do I need to actually have this happen? And then it's a performative, which is I do the thing. My favorite thing is it's in a cycle because it acknowledges that when you are in a system, which we are all in the system of there being socioeconomic systems that control us, gendered systems that control us, race systems based on ability. Um, it's a minefield. We're never going to do it 100% right. But when you know there's a cycle and then you finish a performative and you go, oh wow, we didn't really have seating that accommodated people with, that needed different accommodations. All right, we're gonna do this again, but this time we're gonna be more mindful for, you know, putting in a universal design for learning framing. Because I Googled how to be more equitable for our disabled community, and this thing came up. So it's always a process of learning, but for me, it's about shaking the shame. That shame is in a lot of ways, you know, and I can unpack this. Y'all tell me if I'm jumping a lot of loops here, through hoops here, but it's a manifestation of white supremacy. It's a manifestation of all of these oppressive forces telling you you should feel bad, don't try. No, try. But be in a space where you can tell yourself, I'll try again if it doesn't work, and I will have a justification for people if they are upset. Because that's the other thing. Sometimes community members will be upset when you do something, and if you let them know the steps it took to get there, and then you invite them to help you figure out the next round, they'll either say thank you or they just won't show up because they wanted to say something.
Laura, Lorelai, you were mentioning, I think the word pressure came up for you. Where do you think that pressure should be applied?
Everything I do, I can't control what other people do, right? Like, so everything is like me. Like, so the pressure I apply to myself, right? And hopefully in my modeling, hopefully when I'm talking about it out loud or unpacking it in front of other people, maybe that might encourage somebody else to think a little bit more deeply about what they're doing. But I've gotten to the point where I like the idea, where do I apply pressure? I apply pressure to myself, kind of thing. That's the only thing I can control. I can measure, I can evaluate, and then try to do something about. I don't know.
Yeah, I think just for all of the responsibilities that teachers have and that even like learners have, the students have, I think pressure is like the last thing that they need because that's like it's like every day is pressure. And in thinking about that just now, um, somehow the systems need we need to be applying pressure on the systems that are in place, versus applying pressure on the people, on the same people over and over again, because then we're going to be right back here again when the next crisis comes about. I sort of was implying this, even in my blog, I guess, just about the idea of like selective outrage. I mean, that's problematic because if you're only engaged in in social justice and in dismantling things because of just a present tension, then I'm not saying that that is completely wrong, but if that's like your sole reason for even doing any of this work, then it's diet diversity, you know, and it almost feels like you're only engaging because it's impacting you directly when it's been impacting thousands of people all along. So today, what's today? Wednesday? Yeah, I mean, no, today's Thursday, right? Thursday, Friday Eve. All right. So yeah, so like today is just like a Thursday for some folks, because they've been feeling the pressure like all along. But where is the pressure coming from? It's coming from particular systems that are in place where we need to actually be applying pressure to that versus putting more pressure on the people that are being oppressed by the systems that they're in.
Do y'all think systems? I mean, systems are systems, but they're directed by people, right? So when we say apply pressure to the system, what do we mean? Do we mean like this imaginary system, or do we mean the people who are controlling the systems, right? Like, I don't, again, it's like that zoom in, zoom out. Like, I can just sit here and you'll just see like 30 minutes of me just looking and thinking about like what do I mean by this? So,
You know, it's hard to say people control the systems because they do, but also when you look at how big the system is, even one very powerful person has like this lever. That's all I want to say. I just, it's people, but it's also not people. That's the genius of it.
This is what makes AI so fascinating, is that the data set and the bias that exists in human beings shows up in the data set. And then eventually the computer regenerates something else, and then it becomes a machine, and to a certain extent beyond like our control. So I think that yes, you're right that it these are human beings that are controlling or perhaps managing a system in a certain way. But if that is the case, then yeah, we probably need to respond. And this is where the reactive part of social justice comes in.
Music teaching, for me, has been a space that has been life giving and exhausting, incredibly creative, and also challenging. All of those things wrapped into one for me. And I want to sit on the life giving part of what it means to be a music teacher, because it helps me to maintain, right? Stay afloat. And when we're talking about where do we have control of placing pressure? Where do we have the most impact? I sit with myself, right? I have the most impact on myself and the choices I make on where I can apply pressure. And so, sitting with this idea of music teaching as being life giving and keeping me afloat, I also recognize that I also recognize that what I desire for this profession requires so much, will require so much, like, not only like intention, but also sacrifice, right? Because the things that I desire for our profession is a space where students and teachers, right, are able to sit with the creative mind and the curious mind and think deeply about how that creative curiosity impacts not only themselves but their surroundings. And so bringing it back to the idea of pressure and also the idea of what we have control over, like, I can't control what the students do when they leave the classroom, but we can create opportunities for students to sit and practice being creative curious, being curious, right? Because that's a learned skill. That's something that our society doesn't always, or that's something that our society does not foster with everyone, right? Everyone doesn't have an opportunity to be curious or to dream. But what we can do within our classrooms is create those practices, and we do that like in very clear like structures of saying, let's pause, let's be curious. Like, what is the impact of this particular song on you? What's the desired impact on society? And then the last thing that I'll bring in, or your community, right? Doesn't have to be big society, it could just be your community. And 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 within that, the idea of learning with, Lorenzo, you were talking about the cyclical learning, and then also like bringing people in to learn with the students, the space. I think it's incredibly powerful because if we're not curious, then we don't know where we can take risks, and the risks is where we are able to it's where we are able to create those changes that we wish to see.
I'm thinking about two systems that, as you were talking, Amy, became much more in focus for me. And it's number one, dreaming, and then the other one, memory. Because, all of these systems, what they really intend to do is to steal our memory so we don't remember what it feels like to feel liberation. It's meant to take away our ability to dream because if you cannot see it, you cannot build towards it, right? Um, in my own practice, when I'm not all doom and gloom, I'm very interested in Afrofuturism for that reason. And I think about, what would it be like to focus on an Afrofuturist classroom? And for people who may not be super familiar with that term or only see it as a like perhaps like a design aesthetic, the way it shows up in classrooms, there's a scholar, Itasha Womack. The way she poses it is that she asks children, what would it feel like to live in a future where you feel safe? What would that world look like? A world where you, in your black body, you feel safe and valued. And to be able to have space to dream and think about what that looks like, and then enact it in a classroom space. It may not be right the first time, but if you're willing to at least risk it, it can help perhaps recover memories or at least open up our ability to dream.
And dreaming is powerful. Dreaming also connects to being able to apply pressure, right? Because you can't see it, can't imagine it, right? How are we going to do it? And so I appreciate you bringing that into the space. And I feel like that has been present within this conversation this morning. And so I appreciate you naming it. The next thing that I want to talk about, because folks identified this quote that I used within the opening blog, which was, hope is counter-revolutionary, pressure cooks. And it's from Audre Lorde, and I want to give some context to that because it's from one of her poems, 1 Year to Life on the Grand Central Shuttle. And it's a good poem. You should read it because it's it's almost, and I'm not a poet, right? And we're all musicians here. Not to say that they're not the same, because there are many who are. Nonetheless, what I appreciate about this particular poem is that she talks, it's the setting of, this idea that we have all of these different structures that we don't like, right? Things that suck, right? And for this particular poem, it's set with rush hour New York, subways. It's like nobody wants to be in that rush hour. Nobody wants to be around all this. But we're in it, and she says, hope is counter-revolutionary, pressure cooks, but we have not exploded, right? So that's the next line after she says, pressure cooks, right? And the poem ends with us continuing to be in this space that we don't want to be in, right? And how time can pass and we are still facing the same struggles that we have constantly been complaining about. And so for me, and it's in the middle whenever she talks about how pressure cooks, but we have not yet exploded. It's, for me, it's about how, pressure, I'm not saying that, we don't need hope, because I think hope is connected to dreaming as well. I think all of that is connected. But if we just sit here and just hope, right, we'll never get that change that we desire, right? And it feels as though there's been that understanding here, what are we placing pressure on, right? And also, how do we balance this space of hope, pressure, and the actions and responsibilities and capabilities that we have. And so I just offer it as a curiosity, as a space to sit with, right? Because it can feel ooh, what Audre Lorde say? Hope is counter-revolutionary. What does that mean? Anyway, that's just a bit more context.
Yeah, and I don't know that poem, and that was the question I had, right? That first part was the counter-revolutionary part was but then the pressure cooks was the part that sat with me, right? The pressure is oh, okay, so I need to do something about it, right? Kind of deal. But Lorenzo, thank you so much for talking about dreaming and all that kind of, because I know in my thinking, sometimes I feel like hope and dreaming is a luxury. And sometimes I get really I get not ashamed or anything like that, but I feel guilty, right? And I guess this might be talking a little bit about that white supremacy. I feel guilty when I start to hope or dream. And honestly, I don't remember the last time I actually dreamt. I don't remember a dream anymore. I don't know if I dream anymore, and it kind of makes me sad, right? And it's not that I stop thinking about social justice or working towards equity or justice. It's just that I wonder like where my direction is. Like, is it towards this hope or is it just in the work the whole time and like what that does to somebody's just, you know, mental state? So thanks for reminding me.
Isn't hope necessary? I'm thinking just from a Black perspective that hope is a tool of survival because we know the system that we're in and we know the oppression that has and the ma'afa that has been enacted on us for centuries. And I completely understand that we don't want hope to be the base in terms of action, but there is a physical and a social death that all of us are have looming over our heads on a daily basis simply because of our acts of resistance and rebellion and revolution along the way. So hope still floats. Yes, or am I thinking about it the wrong way, or what are you thinking right now?
We can't exist without hope. I can't speak for everyone. I can't exist without hope. It's directly for me tied to dreaming and imagining and risk taking, right? Hope for me is part of dreaming and creating and being curious, right? So all of that is tied to it.
I focus a bit more on hope in my blog post when we get to it for this reason, because it serves so many purposes, and in some of those purposes are not the best. It can, deactivate us, so to speak, but some of them are essential for survival.
And I look forward to that because I read the draft of your blog post, and that's the next one that's coming up. And so, Lorenzo, can you say a bit more? Because we'll get your teaser and everything too, but say a bit more about what you do.
Yeah, so I'll keep it a little bit under wraps, but I talk about this concept of critical hope, which the idea does not come from me. It comes from scholars that will be cited in that blog post. But what they talk about is there's often this hokey sense of hope where you feel it when things are going well. And it's, things are going great. They're going to keep going great. When really the hope that is revolutionary is the one that kicks in when things are not looking great, when it's dark in the night and you do not know if the sun's going to rise or when it will rise and what it means to exist in that space. Hope looks different in that space because it's reactionary, right? Hope is saying, I'm going to speak truth on this situation. Hope is saying, regardless of the consequences, I know what is the right thing to do in this moment, so I will do it. And it's my hope that I will have others supporting me. And having that nuanced approach really, at least for me, has really shifted how I think about hope as something that can, harm, but something that can also save us.
Yeah, I think of hope from the premise of even Barack Obama, his book a few years ago, "The Audacity of Hope." That hope is audacious, and I think he got the idea from his pastor Jeremiah Wright that there is a sustaining action in hope, and there is courage, and it's a tool to organize, and that hope and struggle are siblings, perhaps. And so the very idea of hope um, perhaps is not counter revolutionary, but actually it is revolutionary because the very revolutions that have taken place, even in this country, surrounding the marginalized and the racially minoritized, et cetera, have been based in hope, in this particular belief of that change is going to come. And so I think that hope is not the problem. I think the complacency is the problem. And I think that's where all of us are getting at, is that we all have this belief that a change is going to come, Sam Cooke. uh, But if we get complacency, and if we're hoping with no action, then yeah, I think that is more of the issue. The complacency is more the issue. And
So, are there other thoughts, other reflections, any other things that we want to share at this midpoint? Because I'm really looking forward to see how we take this concept of hope and we can recognize how it's essential and also recognize um, 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 uh, how how it can be used or weaponized in a way where it can limit progress or whatever, or has in the past. And so within Lorenzo, that blog is coming up next. And after that, then we'll have Lorelei and our other colleague, Jesse Grafgeber. And that final blog will be kind of an opportunity to highlight the discussion that we had with music teachers back in February. And so, Lorelei, do you want to talk a little bit more about what's to come after Lorenzo's?
Yeah, just talking a little bit more about like how the application of all the things or how it has manifested in classrooms or in service teachers, like dealings with navigating of. I know Jesse and I also talked a little bit more about, being outside of Blackness and how we want how we can be supportive, how we can create space, how we can just get out of the way. Like, what does that mean for us is outside of Blackness? And yeah, so just kind of a recap of that, and then just some reflections of being our positionalities within.
Great. I look forward to that too. And also, I hold a lot of gratitude not only for the folks here, especially the folks that are here, in addition to other music teachers and music teacher educators who participated in the original event. And also, huge thank you to Decolonizing the Music Room for being a platform for this. Like, I've been following DTMR for years, right? I think like early grad school or like when I was still teaching, like almost 10 plus years, man. And so to be able to have a platform like DTMR to center these questions is so important. So I hold so much gratitude.